Everybody ready? All right. Well, good morning, everybody. What I'm going to do is begin with the public forum that we have on all board matters, including resolutions. To remind anybody who's watching it or anybody new in the audience, the public forum will begin at 9 o'clock and will go for a maximum of 45 minutes. Individual comments are limited to 2 or 3 minutes, depending on the amount of speakers, and we left to the discretion of the presiding board president. And I would say we only have a small number of folks signing up this morning, so 3 minutes I'd ask you to try to limit your testimony to. If individuals wish to share additional information, they may complete a comment card, and that will be provided to for the board and made part of the board record. I do know that there's a couple folks who want to speak this morning on the ordinance, which is going to be coming up later on the agenda, because you can't remain here for that, so we welcome your comments on the resolution or ordinance. For anybody who wants to engage in this, the sign up for this forum began 30 minutes prior to our meeting, and it was closed immediately at 9 o'clock. So I have the book of the folks who've signed up right now. Comments will be taken in the order of sign up, and scheduled speakers must have signed up prior to when the public forum begins. If individuals have issues that are not within the jurisdiction of the board, TriMet staff will be available to listen to concerns and answer questions 30 minutes prior to the public forum, and if we hear something today, we'll steer you to the right staff person that may be able to help you. So with that, I'm going to get right into the public forum, and those that I have signed up first are Ray Johnson, Elders in Commission, and then Arnold Panich is a member of the TriMet CAT. So if you folks could come on up, we'd love to hear from you. If you can find your way up here. So Ray?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ray Johnson, as was mentioned. I'm a member of the Elders in Action Commission and representing that organization here today. Unfortunately, our chair of our Transportation Committee, Bob Pung, was unable to be here due to, unfortunately, wheelchair issues. The Elders in Action Commission is a senior advocacy council that advises the City of Portland, Multnomah County, and the Department of Aging, Disability, and Veteran Services. The commission works to ensure that the metro area is an age-friendly community for our older adults and the disabled population. Our commission members, many of whom are bus and light rail users by necessity and by choice, reflect a cross-section of the region's older adult population. The Elders in Action Commission has expressed support for the extension of the TriMet ticket transfer time in the past, and we remain in support of this extension. Our preference would be for a full 1-hour extension from 2 hours to 3 hours, but we are supportive of a minimum half-hour that is being proposed here today. Older adults and people with disabilities who rely on public transportation their trips to align with bus schedules and the existing 2-hour transfer time. For this reason, they often must use 2 or 3 tickets per outing to complete their trips. For riders with lower incomes, paying for an extra ticket may mean foregoing other important expenses like food or much-needed medicine. The Elders in Action Commission, on behalf of older adults and people with disabilities in the TriMet service area, encourages the TriMet Board to increase the transfer time for all bus and MAX tickets by at least 1/2 hour. Thanks again so much for the opportunity to give this testimony today.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate your comments. Arnold?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm a member of the Committee on Accessible Transportation at TriMet and volunteer in other capacities. I'm madly in love with TriMet. I have been a bus rider for a long time, starting off with streetcars in Detroit, Michigan.
All right.
In Detroit, we tell people where we live by our parish. And so St. Bridget Parish has a priest, and he said, if you give me a boy for 5 years, I'll make him a Catholic for life. If you give me a kid on a bus, I'll make him a bus rider for life. And I try to encourage us to have the young people on the buses. I also am supportive of the 2.5-hour transfer. I would prefer the 3-hour. We have people riding long distances who are vulnerable, disabled, elderly, and poor. And so if you can do that, make it longer, it's going to be easier for everybody. Some of those bus rides are pretty long, as you know. Secondly, I would like to advocate for a continuation of the fare structure as is. You have a handy booklet here, and as you know, the budget is 23% of operating expenses comes from the fare box. So if you push it a nickel or quarter or whatever you push it, it's not going to make the big picture any much larger. Your big picture, of course, are payroll taxes, government grants, and other sources of income. So I advocate that you hold the line on fares as long as possible so that we have an equitable transit system that everybody can ride. Thirdly, I want to give you an anecdote. I have ridden half a dozen lines now, end to end. And a month ago, I rode the number 6 Martin Luther King bus. I started at Goose Hollow and we ended at Jansen Beach. It was funny because the general manager was on the bus too, as well as Bob Stacy from Metro. So I was in good company. But mostly I want to tell you about the disabled, the elderly, and the vulnerable. This is the Martin Luther King bus that runs up and down the spine of Portland. It handles the real people. And on that one bus ride, I saw something that I just didn't believe. 12 times the ramp was deployed, and 12 times people who are the most vulnerable in our community got on without any problem. On a packed bus, the people got out of the way for the person in the wheelchair, the walker, the crutches, the blind, using that ramp. And 12 times the driver had to discharge the passenger at 12 more stops. 24 times the ramp was deployed perfectly without any problems. Congratulations. Thank you. My time is up.
Thank you, Arnold. I appreciate your comments, yes.
Want to say something?
Sure, you bet.
Arnold, just very quickly, I too rode streetcars in Philadelphia. Everybody was like you, which parish are you from? And always liked to hold on to the back of the streetcar, the bus, on icy days as a kid, and we could take little rides.
Well, I don't have the experience of doing hooky bob like you did, but I must tell you, we had 2 religions in Detroit. We had Catholics and publics. Yeah. I happen to be a public, so the inculcation of the religion onto me didn't work. But I do know that that's what the priests say. I happen to have a rabbi, but I was a public, not a Catholic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, actually, this is for Ray. I've had, so Bob Pung is, of course, a constituent out in my part of the region, out in Gresham, the new Lake Oswego. And I was just going to let that set in. And I have heard from Bob, and we've had a couple of opportunities to touch base on his thoughts and Elders in Action. And actually, I'll be speaking at the January Elders in Action meeting, talking about TriMet and answering questions. But I just want to extend to Elders in Action and Bob Pung. If you guys don't know him, Bob is a tireless worker and champion for the disabled, and the work that he does is something that's very much appreciated. So if you could pass that along to him for myself, that would be excellent. Thank you for coming and speaking since he couldn't make it.
Thank you. Well, that actually concludes the public forum. I realize all the other people are signed up, and they'll be speaking later on Ordinance 332. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon Board of Directors to order for Wednesday, December 10th, 2014, and we'll get right into our regular business agenda. And the first thing on the agenda is our board reports. And I'm going to turn to my right and your left and ask Director Bethel to give us a report on the Committee on Accessible Transportation. Are you ready?
Ready. Good morning.
Good morning.
Board and Mr. President, and to those of you, I was just trying to look quickly to see what it may have in regards to the CAT. CAT did not meet last month due to a tour of the new facilities on Center Street. I do think we are scheduled for a meeting this month, and we will have a better, more to report to you in our January meeting.
Right, I understand they were pretty impressed with the Operations Center.
Yes.
Good, good. All right. Well, why don't I let you keep the floor here. Maybe you can talk about anything we need to know on it from the TriMet Accountability Committee.
Again, a very quick report on the TriMet accountability. A couple of things that have happened. We will be meeting on this Friday, December 12th, and this will be our final meeting of the year. Starting in 2015, next year, we will begin meeting quarterly. At our meeting on Friday, we will be reviewing any new updates that have come in over the reporting line. And as well as we'll be doing a year-end review as to what we have accomplished since first convening in February. And as a reminder, we will be back to the board in the spring of next year to give a mid-year report as it has been requested on the ethics hotline and any other salient issues that may have come up in the process of operating the ethics hotline at this point. I'll take any questions that anyone might have at this point.
Any questions or comments?
If not, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's to all of you.
There you go. Well, let's move on then to the Transit Equity Advisory Committee and Director Zaragoza.
Yes, the TEAC, Transit Equity Advisory Committee, met in November 20th, and we had a presentation from the staff on the Ordinance 332 equity analysis. And of course, the committee has always a lot of questions and good comments and dialogue. And generally, they were agreed with the analysis of the report, but one of the areas that there was concern about was the definition of low income. Currently, TriMet is defined as 150% of the federal poverty level, and so there was concern about that, and staff is going to look into that, and we'll continue that discussion in the new year. In addition to that, we had an update on the e-fare, and the committee offered some recommendations in terms of community strategies and engagement. And again, we'll be talking about that more in the new year. So that was our report.
Good. So we had a busy meeting. Any comments or
Yes.
questions for Director Zaragoza? Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move then on to the Metropolitan Policy Advisory Committee. Director Prosser.
Yes, the Metropolitan Advisory Committee meeting has been meeting. Generally, it's Wednesday afternoons after this meeting. Tonight, we'll be meeting to take action on the final recommendation to the Metro Council on the Climate Smart Communities project. We do have that scheduled as part of our briefing at the end of this meeting, so I won't go into a lot of detail on that. I think Eric Hesse will be here and we'll be able to answer any questions anybody may have. The Finance and Audit Committee met just prior to this meeting. We received a briefing on the initial look at the 5-year financial forecast for the upcoming 5 years. Things are looking much better than they have in the past. The forecast in prior years, of course, carried a lot of uncertainty because of the uncertainty over the labor contract, and since we were able to reach agreement with ATU, that uncertainty is no longer in the forecast, which makes it easier to take a look at how things are coming out. Revenues are looking strong. Looks like we'll be able to meet a lot of our operational needs. That will actually be coming. We did ask some clarifying questions, and primarily in how data is presented, ask staff to do a little bit more research on some items, and then that will be coming to the board on our January meeting. And so you can expect a full briefing for staff on that. The other item that we went over was the update to the investment policy. That's something we do every year. The proposed changes are relatively minor. the three members of the committee were comfortable with those changes. Again, that will be brought to the board at our January meeting. We did recommend that staff bring that on the consent agenda, so when the agenda does come out, I encourage all board members to take a look at that, and if they have any questions, let staff know, and we could take it off the consent agenda if it requires further discussion. But other than that, that's it.
Good report. Questions or comments for Director Prosser? No, thank you very much. Well, then let's move on to the general manager report. Let's start with the general manager comments. Director, Mr. General Manager.
Well, good morning, President Warner, members of the board. I did want to just start to acknowledge and thank 4 of our board members for actually attending an event last week where we were celebrating the success of our disadvantaged business program and hiring contractors owned by women and people of color. We've now topped $170 million in revenue to DBE firms, and it was a great opportunity to celebrate that. And I particularly want to thank board members Esmond, Stovall, and Prosser, and particularly Dr. Bethel, who was the previous winner of a DBE Champions Award, and he was present to present the award to employees of Stacy and Whitbeck, and also Hoffman Construction for the great work that they had done in, frankly, exceeding substantially their goals and participation in related disadvantaged business on the project. So again, I just want to acknowledge that great milestone and appreciate the board's support of that program. A few other quick updates. I did want to just, oh, sorry, yes.
Very quickly, Neil, what you've done here at TriMet with DBE's apprenticeship has caught the attention of a lot of people in Salem, politicians, and I'm involved in some legislation on that, and I'll follow up with you.
Great. Well, we're pleased. It's been a terrific program, actually, that has grown and learned every project we've had, and so I think we've been able to take all those lessons learned and apply them on Portland, Milwaukee to really terrific results. So again, thank you to the board. Ridership for November was perhaps a little lower than we sometimes like to see, but you also remember we had a pretty bad storm during work week in November that sort of kept ridership down, we believe. We also have a trend of lower gas prices, and that also has an effect on ridership. So our total ridership was basically flat. It totaled, when you added those things together, it was actually a 0.1% decline. We actually did see some increases in the bus ridership of about 2.4%, but Max and West were down a bit. And again, I think a lot of that was really due to the weather during that one very cold week. But we'll continue to watch that very carefully as we continue here. I did want to give you, and as I've talked to board members recently, there's been, I think, a recognition on all of your parts about how important the reliability of the system is. And I wanted to give you just a little insight into some of the programs that we have underway right now to improve the reliability, particularly of the bus system, but also of the rail system. We have a department headed by Ken Zadarin, who we call it the Service Delivery Department, and they are the ones who actually write the schedules. And we have been in a process of picking a number of lines that are underperforming related to reliability and then focusing on them and making sure that we put the investment into them to bring them up to speed. One thing that I just wanted to emphasize about this is that one of the key reasons we do that is that it is really important for our operators to make sure that most of the time they're operating on time and get their breaks at the end of the line and have the time for their own needs and recovery at the end of the lines. So this is a really important part of maintaining our system. And as you all know, and as everyone in this region knows, traffic congestion has been increasing, and that ends up slowing our system, requires more time on the buses, more time in the schedules, and added investment from us. The Service Delivery Department actually starts with our CAD AVL data. The computer tells us when buses are late, and we begin to have some assessment about that on-time performance based on what our computer programs, frankly, tell us. But then what we do is we actually send the schedule writers out to talk to the individual operators who are on those lines to find out what the actual experience is. An example of doing this right now, I think quite successfully, has been the Line 71, which is the 60th Avenue and 122nd Avenue. It was down in the 60% reliability. We've raised that by 5%. And actually, one of the interesting things about that 5%, those are very hard-fought percents, by the way. To get that much is really quite a dramatic improvement. Well, just to sort of note that and I've got the numbers here somewhere, that when we actually started this process, only about 35% of the operators thought the line was well scheduled. After we finished a series of improvements, that number went to 83%. So we saw a great improvement in terms of the satisfaction of our operators related to operating that rate. And we know that has a lot to do, a lot of implications for the safety of the system, as well as the predictability for customers. As we went through this, and with the necessary data, we actually invested about $280,000 annually in new service for that line. With that $280,000, as I said, we raised reliability by 5 percentage points, and actually increased much more dramatically on the weekends, 12 percentage points and 9.8% on Sundays, for example. So the other thing we saw was an increase in ridership, about 5% increase in ridership over on the line. And again, this hasn't been in place for that long, so we'll probably see even more results on that. So the reason I sort of bring these stats on is that sometimes it's not very, it doesn't get headlines, this kind of work, because but it does take investment, and it does take regular service alignment. And as you see our forecasts, we actually predict a reliability and crowding line in terms of responding to that. And frankly, I think over the recession, we did not respond as well as we should have. We're trying to catch up, and so every quarter now, every sign up, we're picking additional lines to do this kind of detail work on. And I'm very proud of the work. I think it's going to end up with some dramatic results in terms of improved system for our customers over a long period of time. I would also tell you that some of our lines are, as a matter of fact, I had this conversation yesterday with Board Member Saragosa, are so crowded that the most important thing we can do is, instead of just more and more and more service, is making sure that the intervals are scheduled in and actually managed in a good way, so that will even out the loads over time. Sometimes we have so many buses on light, it's actually not even reasonable to begin to add more, and so we need to think about parallel service and some other strategies as we move into the future. But that's the realm of the service enhancement plans that you also know are underway. So I also just wanted to note that on the MAX side, Bob Nelson is leading an internal committee to look at rail reliability, and that will both look at the infrastructure as well as the standard operating procedures of our rail system, to make sure that we're raising the level of reliability as much as we can. Our tracks are very crowded now with a lot of trains and a lot of service, and that things do occasionally go wrong out on the system. So we need to make sure that we have a system that's reliable and has some redundancy in it, so that it can absorb some things like events that occur on the system over time. So again, a big effort underway right now to improve rail reliability, and you'll hear some recommendations coming out of that as we approach the next budget and the budget after that. So just to note, that work is underway. And I'm happy to pause for a moment and see if there's any questions on the whole issue of system reliability, but it's a huge effort right now, agency-wide.
Okay.
So we have everything we need someplace in the warehouse to fix everything?
Well,
Within 24 hours, that, we don't, a switch goes bad and we don't have to wait a week to get something from out east or anything?
So those things that are on sort of that critical nature, we do focus on making sure we have stores for that. I could tell you, though, that there are still some components that if they were to go bad, then that, for example, car would need to go out of service, and we occasionally will have that circumstance. But in terms of the right-of-way, we can piece it together, and sometimes need, some time to come back and do a higher-level repair if something goes wrong.
I'm just thinking if we need more resources, that's something that we want to keep the customers happy.
Exactly.
And the public happy.
And that's one of the areas, but there are many other areas that we're looking
Okay.
at to make sure that we are doing everything we can.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just note one other thing. We in your financial report, when we certainly respond to this, I just wanted to note that there is some, while we have seen over a period of time growing ridership this year, we have not seen growing revenue at the same rate. While we're pretty much on plan, I would just note that that's a trend that we're watching very carefully. But it appears as if our current customers are getting higher value out of the passes and day passes that are sort of capped in terms of total cost. But we're going to continue to watch that very carefully from a budgetary standpoint and factor that into the next review. I have some other reports here, but before I finish my report, I do want to go through sort of a year in review with you. But if it pleases the board, I'd like to bring up Stephanie Colleran and Harry Supporta for the safety report, which will focus on environmental safety or environmental programs.
Sounds good to me. Please proceed.
Morning, President Warner, members of the board. This morning, we would like to give you an overview of our environmental program. And this group, which is part of the Safety, Security, Environmental Services Division, is really responsible for managing all waste disposal, whether it's generating recycling, paper recycling, or managing hazardous waste. I also would like to emphasize that we're not only looking at the minimum standards, it's just not being in compliance with regulation, but it's also going above and beyond that, and Stephanie will explain some of that to you. This team also is responsible for maintaining the stormwater and wastewater permits at all of our facilities. That includes the dry wells, catch basins, and other features at the garages. They maintain the stormwater bioswales and catch basins at several park and ride locations. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they handle all the environmental regulatory requirements, whether it's waste generation or underground and above-ground storage tanks. So, Stephanie, if you'd give us an overview.
Happy to. Okay, so I'm Stephanie Colleran, Manager of Environmental Services. The main responsibilities of our department, briefly, wastewater. Aside from managing the permit requirements, reporting, and inspections, we do all the wastewater maintenance, not all of it, but we're involved with the wastewater maintenance, cleaning the steam base, sludge pits, cleaning the oil water separators, and the general permit management work. For stormwater, as Harry mentioned, we maintain all the bioswales, which is special landscaping requirements, catch basins at park and rides and garages, maintaining UICs, which are dry wells. So that's cleaning those and maintaining the integrity of the dry wells, and also stormwater permit management and training at the garages for the maintenance staff primarily. And we as TriMet are, I think, the first non-municipality to receive the dry well permit from Oregon DEQ. Our storage tanks, We maintain the licenses for those storage tanks. We maintain the tank monitoring equipment. And we also manage and are involved with DEQ inspections. Waste management, that, as Harry mentioned, is involved with everything from paper shredding and recycling, used oil management and disposal, and hazardous waste management and disposal. Our chemical management, we work closely with the safety department to approve chemicals for use on our sites. If it's a hazard to people or environment, they're caught in a review process, these issues. And if it's a chemical that would need to be included on reports, that's also included in the review process. And then also any reporting that's required for the chemicals that we have and use on site. And we're also involved with spill cleanup. So if we have a spill at one of the garages or over the road spills, we carry pagers in the environmental department and work with our spill contractors to make sure these are cleaned. If any oil or spilled material were to reach a public waterway, we would be responsible for reporting that to the appropriate agencies. And some of the achievements of the Environmental Services Department, all of our underground storage tanks, which are no small matter, have been upgraded over I think the past 8 years. And our last project is just completing now. So everything's been upgraded to double wall tanks. We, of course, if you unearth a storage tank, you do run into some issues. We're in the process of working with DEQ to close our last tank leak issue, which isn't actually from a tank, it was from a line. But everything is also being monitored currently, and everything is in good shape. We have reduced wash water permit requirements, or actually our wash water permit requirements are exempt at both our Merlot and El Monica garages. This just happened in the past year. This is based on the amount of water we recycle and reuse in the wash water or the bus and train washing process. And the wastewater permit at our Center Street garage is being downgraded, and this will have reduced monitoring and inspection requirements. So every single TriMet garage is considered a conditionally exempt small quantity generator. What this means is that these garages produce a small enough volume of hazardous waste materials that we have reduced reporting requirements, reduced inspection frequency. Sorry. And this is, it's not common in big industry to be a conditionally exempt small quantity generator. To reach this status, part of that chemical review process, we have a very small amount of hazardous materials used on site, which is great for safety and great for the environment. So this also generates less hazardous waste, and enough so that we have been reduced to conditionally exempt small quantity generators throughout TriMet. So the past 14 years and counting at our Center Street garage, we've received awards from Clean Water Services, which is our permit regulator for our Center Street garage. And these are some of the award ceremonies over the previous 14 years. With our permit being downgraded. We probably won't see the awards down the road, but that's a good trade-off. So our upcoming goals and challenges, as I mentioned earlier, we did just receive our UIC dry well permit. So we've submitted all of our plans to DEQ on our monitoring plan, our monitoring plans. So we will be putting these into action, and I don't expect to have any problems with this. One problem we are experiencing is high levels of zinc in stormwater at our west garage. We've worked to track down the source of the zinc, and will be replacing walkways on the roof that are what we've determined are contributing the zinc to the stormwater. And it's actually pushing us right up against the stormwater limits, or our stormwater permit limits. So this should fix that problem, and we'll follow this down the road to make sure that that is the solution. Another challenge we're facing is with PMLR, smooth transition for all of our new stormwater features. We have several new bioswales, several eco roofs involved with PMLR, and we're actively working with our capital projects department, so we are ready and prepared to deal with all of these as soon as we need to, which is in the near future.
So that provides you with a brief overview, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
I'm just curious, so you found out that there were higher levels of zinc?
Yes.
So how often is the water tested, or is that?
The permit requirements are 4 times per permit year. We have sampled, I haven't even totaled the number of samples we've taken, because we've taken at least 7 samples at our compliance point, which is the point that's required by the permit to be sampled. We've also sampled various locations throughout the property, trying to pinpoint the source of the zinc. We narrowed it down to the roof, and then we sampled different points on the roof and found it to be metal walkways and ladders.
The problem at West was fairly complex because of all the potential sources that needed to be identified, and then individual sampling had to be at those particular sources. And through the environmental group, it was determined that it was the walkways that were the larger contributor, which was a little surprising.
Very surprising. The walkways aren't a huge portion of the roof, and are not.
Are not, okay.
But the analysis for the water samples taken, direct runoff from the walkways, were substantially higher than anything else. And we were shocked by the numbers we saw coming off of there. And so we collected that sample during the heavy storm in November. We haven't been able to reproduce that sample just because we haven't had enough rain, but we're in the process of working on either coating or replacing the walkways, hopefully replacing and just get rid of the problem altogether. And if we have another opportunity before that happens to grab another sample. We also have another product that we're using that pulls zinc from the stormwater before it discharges from the property. So we do have intermediate measures to deal with the zinc in the meantime.
Thank you.
I did safety at a high-tech place for a number of years, and one of the things that was beat into me, and worked with the the workers the DAS sheets and familiarity and location. So I'm just asking you, the workers have access to that, say at the bus barn or?
We have a very active program in that area. So we make they're now called materials data sheets. The safety's been taken off, don't know why. But we have a very active program. It's an online program. Not only do we have it available online to all workers, but we also go through and meet with the workers periodically, so whenever new chemicals are introduced, they are informed of the chemicals and the potential hazards and how to protect themselves.
Okay. That's what I was looking for. That's why they say thank you. You don't think about how large our facilities are and how much impervious surface and other things we have until you put some of these things up on the board. So it's a big, big job. And I assume it's a galvanized steel walkway. That's why we're having a problem. And okay, all right, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Members of the Board, in your packet is a new summary of our electronic fare program. This is a request and actually a very good practice on our part to sort of give you a status report on this. We'll provide this to you every couple of months as major milestones are here. I've asked Chris Tucker to just spend a moment walking through it with you so you can sort of be familiar with what to look for in those future updates. And of course, we'll continue to brief you as key milestones on this program continue. So, Chris.
Thank you, Neil. Good morning. Again, Chris Tucker, Director of Revenue Operations, and in your packet there you'll have the summary of e-fare activities, and as Neil mentioned, we'll continue to do this going on an ongoing basis. I did want to touch on just a handful of these updates today, but I wanted to leave time for any questions, whether it be in the packet or about e-fare overall. We have reached 75% of the preliminary design review milestone. We have achieved that, which includes the back office development, the validator development, the equipment, retail network design, and the civil construction design, meaning the placement of those validators within the system. Overall, the e-fare project is on time and on budget, and we are now beginning final design review of the project in all those key areas I mentioned. We did give Init, who is the back office developer, an additional 6 weeks to update the preliminary design documents. And we did that to ensure the quality and accuracy of the design documents. It's critical to us that they understand exactly what it is that we're trying to accomplish and leave no stone unturned. So after that 6 weeks we gave them, they're now meeting and or exceeding expectations through all of the design documents. Within the first page of that packet, we included it essentially an executive summary, and at the bottom we wanted to include some of the key challenges staff is working on now. So first off, our ticket vending machines. In the current environment, if a ticket vending machine is to lose network connection, it can still take a cash payment, but it can't accept bank cards. This happens occasionally, maybe every couple of months, where we have a systemic issue, a network failure, server failure, et cetera. And the TVM goes in offline mode. But in an electronic fare world, that becomes a little more complicated because there's an account on the back end that needs to recognize the ticket sale and transaction. So we're working on design alternatives in the event that a ticket machine goes offline due to a network or server failure. Again, it doesn't happen very often, and when it does, it's really a matter of getting it on within minutes versus hours. But there are issues that can be systemic, such as a fiber break on the steel bridge that could bring things down for hours. So we're looking at what those alternatives are to make sure that the TVMs can still issue a ticket in an offline mode and it be an electronic ticket in the future. Another challenge that we're looking at is the retail network, grocery stores and convenience stores. From that perspective, it works very well. It's a one-step process. You load value to the card, you're on your way. But at some of the check cashing locations, they leverage Western Union. And Western Union has a national policy of wanting their customers to fill out a form before they load value. And the form can be as little as a name and a phone number, but it's a step in a procedure that we would like to get removed. So we're working at whether we look at different retail locations in place of those or leave those in there as a step that customers go through. But we want to look at all the alternatives because that's, even though it's at a small number of locations, it's enough that we want to remove that step altogether if we can. So we're looking at alternatives, and we'll continue to work with the program manager on that. And the last key update we wanted to provide has to do with the civil construction work. After the CMGC process and gone through with Stacy and Whitback, it's an iterative process as we go through overall. The initial contractor pricing that we had came in recently, and it was 17.5% higher than the board authorization that you saw in August. It's about $842,000. So staff is looking at alternatives to that, and essentially this is what you would look at as remodel work. So as you, in your kitchen, tearing up the floor, you find things that maybe you hope to not find, but it is there. So we're going to continue to peel that back as the contractor dives in and identifies additional information such as network infrastructure that may need to be added. They'll continue to refine that pricing, and then they'll come back, capital projects will come back early 2015 with the final plan, whether that includes value engineering or whatnot. We also added a few validators at locations such as Rose Quarter because there are crushed loads after Blazer games. We wanted to make sure that the fair enforcement strategy is really well aligned with where the validators are. So some of those tweaks, and that will happen over the next few months, and we'll come back to you in the next few months with the next steps. So on page 2 of the packet, these are kind of just brief references here, the back office information. You're going to see a little picture of a validator. So that's the preliminary design of what the validator is going to look like. It deployed validators in California, in Sacramento specifically. We asked them to make the validator smaller, more of a modern, sleek design. But one of the big benefits of that is on the bus, so that it has a smaller footprint and doesn't block the view of the operator. So safety was a priority there to make sure that it's you can't see it as an operator or it's barely visible. On page 3 of the packet, you'll see a preliminary design of the actual poles. Again, it's kind of a small photo. It's very preliminary, but the idea is that it will be it'll have an actual sign above the validator, really making it stand out, very clear where that validator is located. You can see it from quite a distance. So that preliminary design gives you an idea of the footprint and what that'll look like at our rail stations. And then on page 4, it's just a quick 2-month look ahead. We will be knee-deep into final design review, as I mentioned, and we'll be into preliminary design review of the mobile apps and working through the scope of services for the ticket vending machines. There is more information in the packet, but I think I'll stop there and leave time for questions or anything else you might have. Yes?
Yes, I have a couple of questions, Chris. First of all, let's begin on page number 1. What are you trying to tell us in this chart? Is it when everything is going to start and how long it's going to go, and then there's one red line here?
Yeah, it's really looking at kind of a snapshot of where we're at over the last, I guess over the next 6 months, a little more detail on really what we had planned from a schedule perspective, where we hoped to be from a schedule perspective. So the very top line is kind of the overall program. So we know that this is going to take several years to get to full implementation. So that's just showing you plan and actual, we're still on track. So overall, we're in good shape. The init system design where I referenced is that we really initially planned to be done with that by sometime in February. We've delayed that by 6 weeks for the reason of getting the design documents correct. So we wanted to call that out, that's an area that missed the mark by 6 weeks. It doesn't impact the overall schedule, but it was important that we wanted to point that out. And that was the previous explanation I gave on that. And the rest of these are just showing you that what we planned and what the actual is still on target. I put the TVMs at the bottom. That's still a multi-year deployment effort. That was really just a snapshot, is what that was looking at.
Okay. In future, it would be helpful if we're designing this, that there is something that says this is showing, so I know what it's referencing to. I kept trying to figure out.
Got it.
It's a little small, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little small, yes.
The other one has to do with page 3, and you know which section I'm going to go to.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'd like to know, particularly within it, what makes up the 13% of the DBE? Is this all what Acumen did, or is there some contracts beyond Acumen that has been included in the DBE?
As of right now, it's all Acumen. That's the project management overall. We are still in the design phase of the project. Once we get into, and this is whether it be in it or others, once we get into the development and the implementation, additional opportunities arise that's not just kind of software related. So from that in it, it's very specific to Acumen.
Okay. Well, you need not to say that I'm not very pleased that it's only Acumen that has done that. Was one of the things that I was concerned about when the contract was let, that we would have good DBE participation. And thus far, though that number is there at 13%, I'm only seeing that with one company. And I'm not seeing any raindrops really in Portland out of this.
Yeah, so from a in-it Acumen perspective, that is certainly a big piece of it. There are some other opportunities within eFair that we continue to tackle. So it kind of, wherever we can look, we want to look there. So I've got a few that I'll mention. These are still in the works, so I'm not saying these are an absolute, but some examples of technical design documentation. So we're looking at a local DBE to help with the technical design documentation. We're looking at a local DBE for the procedure writing over the next year or so. That'll be important to get the internal staff ready for implementation. CH2M Hill's commitment, that actually is, you can see the commitment's high and the DBE is low. That was actually expected because phase 2 is a long multi-year implementation, and this will go up to and should meet their commitment as we get into testing and implementation of the system infrastructure. So that commitment is really tied to that implementation. But again, that's CH2M Hill, not in it. The project management is the in it piece, and then there's the civil construction piece. So at this point, from a design perspective, we're limited to the design and the documentation. So we're looking at using, it's not in it or Acumen, but local firms to help with the documentation.
More questions, I assume, as this moves forward in that particular area.
Understood.
Yeah, Chris, can you, on page 1, maybe we can sit down, you and I and Dan, just to get an idea why the 17% increase.
Sure. So
and we don't have to do it right now.
Oh, okay.
Between now and the next one, you know, I'm around.
Absolutely.
You know,
Okay.
I'm not busy Christmas Day because I've been a bad boy this year. So,
Okay.
yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yes, Director Prosser.
Chris, back to the chart on page 1. I appreciate the idea of the chart, but I kind of struggle with it because you show the plan, which is good, and then you show the actual, and the actual is the same as the plan. So I see actual and I think of actual work completed to date, and that's obviously not what this is because actual goes all the way out to 217.
Yeah.
For my purposes, it'd be helpful if we could show a project work completed to date in here somehow.
Okay.
And this would be a little bit more meaningful to me.
Okay. Would it be helpful to have kind of a completed and then also the look ahead for the next 6 months?
Yes.
Is that useful?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's missing is really the history of the last couple of
Yeah,
years.
where are we in the implementation of this? I can't see from
Okay.
this chart. And I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
And for example, where you've had to give more time for the system integrator design, you know, calling that out in red is good, but maybe tack that on to the end of the plan. It's because you are adjusting the plan. So that might be a way to do it too.
Okay.
So. But I like where you're going with it. It just needs a couple of tweaks to be
Okay.
a little more useful for
And
me.
I think I need to add more real estate.
Yeah.
So I think that
Yeah,
would
that
help.
is awful small print.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. The small print is an impediment to some of us.
Understood.
I think many of us have to.
Okay.
Everybody except Joe.
No.
Other questions from the board? I guess I just have one comment. If I'm reading this correctly, the Title 6 analysis, you've selected a contractor to do that work. We'll probably be looking at it, about a year from now in terms of the actual work product. But I know there'll be a great deal of interest by a lot of folks on this effort, and especially with the issues of policies and principles we're trying to incorporate in this. So think about coming back to the board with kind of a status update on the Title VI and kind of how you're progressing. I think that would be very helpful for us and others.
Mr. Board President, I was going to note that is indeed part of our plan, and indeed a lot of work with TIAC and CAT and some of our other constituents as well and that's why we've given ourselves quite a bit of time for the Title VI analysis to be developed and displayed, and any mitigation measures to be vetted. What I would expect is that we'll have regular check-ins with the board related particularly to the fair policies. And as we talked at your retreat in October, you've given us some general outlines about where to go with those fair policies, but we also know we have to do a due diligence related to the Title VI work and sort of detailed drill down of what that means. And we'll be coming back to you. And I think our goal is actually next October to have that ordinance adopted. Again, regular updates will be provided.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. The board will appreciate that too.
Yep.
Good.
Just the other thing that I would note, if I might, is that one of the things as we look at that package of policies, we also want to make sure that from an equity standpoint, we're looking at all the alternatives available to us. So, if, for example, many of you may know that the King County Transit System in Seattle is beginning to implement this March Alone Compare program. It's interesting that that is really dependent on first putting in place an electronic fare system on their part. And so that whole system depends on the electrons. So, but that's another interesting, I think, experiment that's underway right now in a county to the north that we want to keep our eye on as we advance these policies as well, just to make that connection as well.
Yeah. I agree. All right, thank you.
So if there are no further questions for Chris, what I wanted to do as sort of a wrap-up to what has turned out to be a little bit of a long general manager report, apologize for that. But I think this 2014 has been really a very significant year for TriMet, and I wanted to thank the board, first of all, for your involvement and your support as we've advanced a number of very important topics. And I've got a little PowerPoint that I just wanted to go through quickly, and certainly can pause for questions along the way, but I just think that it was important for you to see how much progress you've helped us make over the last year. And the first is clearly our sustainable financial plan. We have adopted the strategic financial plan with a lot of work from our board finance committee chair and colleagues. And clearly, the biggest piece of this is the ratification of our labor contract, which really puts solid ground under our feet financially and provides certainty for both our riders and our employees that we didn't have when we came into this year. Second, we've really done a lot of investment in service. And if you stack this up over this last calendar year, look at some of these numbers. In March, $3.8 million to begin the restoration of midday frequent service on our frequent service lines. September, another $4.5 million for that end. December will include actually another $570,000 for schedule kind of reliability, is the example of the line 71 that I was speaking to you of earlier. And to come in early first half of 2015, $1.5 million more for frequent service on Saturdays and $2.2 for max and weekends on Sundays. So we will also be continuing, as I noted, every quarter for every sign-up, a number of bus reliability improvements and capacity and crowding improvements as well. So we've done a lot in the last year in terms of improving the overall service. But we've also looked to the future, and one of the key milestones, our partner Metro is leading both of the first two studies, but on the PAL division corridor, a major step was taken when BRT was selected as the mode. And that actually allows us to advance the engineering work as a contract later on your agenda notes and really move that project forward at a very good pace. And so we're anxious to move that work. And similarly, in the Southwest Corridor, we're continuing a longer, probably more methodical effort because of the size and challenges of that corridor. But again, partnering with our colleagues at Metro on that. We've continued our work on the service enhancement plans, completed the plan for the west side, nearly complete for the southwest, and receiving input and community outreach on the east side, north central, and the southeast sections. So all of that is underway. This has resulted in 9 of the past 11 months in growing ridership. I think the key to that has really been the restoration of our frequent service lines. And that has actually brought bus ridership to the highest point since May of 2009. And while West has leveled off over the last couple of months, if you look over the fiscal year, it's still up 16% over the previous fiscal year. So really good results in that regard. And on safety and security, we've now completed the installation of cameras on all MAX platforms. We've improved our outreach related to our operators and the tools available for them to alert us through the safety assessment process of safety issues. We've been able to hold down our reduction in crime that was reported in the Oregonian, as you noted on the right-hand side of the screen here. We've been able to hold those reduced levels in 2014, despite the fact we actually have more service out. We are underway and nearly complete with many of our employee recertification efforts for operators and supervisors and many others. So that training part of the safety program is going strong. We've initiated job hazard analysis in many of our maintenance efforts that were not previously subject to that. And we've implementing and beginning to implement much more thoroughly our safety management information system and beginning to train the whole organization on that. So I think we're making some good headway on that front as well. Related to fares, you'll remember that in the last budget, you actually lowered the 2-hour youth ticket from $1.65 to $1.25 region-wide, and that you approved a much more sustainable funding program for the Portland Public Schools Student Pass. We've continued a very successful implementation of the mobile ticketing app, 2 million fares in the first year, and 150,000 downloads. So pretty substantial utilization of that product. One of the things I think Chris and his team can be particularly proud of is the upgrades and fixes and general chasing of problems away from our TVMs. So we're now achieving 98% reliability or better on a very regular rate, and customer complaints are way down as much as half over a year ago. So great progress in that regard. And as you note, the e-fare system is underway, and the Access Transit program that our Department of Transit Equity have been pursuing is actually taken on a lot of speed of late, and we actually have 49 nonprofits on the fare assistance program and 50 on the fare relief program. So we are actually seeing a lot of benefit from that program to a number of nonprofit and the nonprofits that are community partners and their clients. Related to just general system improvements, I wanted to note we've added or replaced 87 new buses. We have 3 on the way. So that's a total of 90. We've launched a new trip planner. We have more information displays out on bus stops and light rail platforms. We've improved Transit Tracker to be more reliable. We've begun the retrofit of our light rail vehicles to have clearer and better signage, electronic signage on board. And we've really begun to initiate a whole series of MAX system improvements, and we thank our customers for their patience as we've done this. Certainly you've seen the progress on the Sunset Transit Center platform, the tracks at the Gateway Transit Center in Lloyd District, and many safety improvements along the way. And I might note that that continues to be an emphasis and will continue to be a budget item for us, because as land use continues to intensify around the light rail system, we need to come back and really check the pedestrian flows and making sure that the crossings and facilities we have are as safe as they can possibly be. Needless to say, we've had great progress on the Orange Line. Only 276 days, I see, until opening. 91% construction complete. We named the bridge. We have completed, we are substantially complete on the west segment and the bridge itself. We've begun to test our new Type 5 light rail vehicles here in Portland. We have artwork and amenities going in. We've opened our new operations headquarters, and we talked a little bit earlier about the disadvantaged business statistics, but we have now created nearly 13,000 jobs by our calculations on the project. 538 firms involved, 80% of those were Oregon-based. So great work continues on the project. We've also gone through a number of external reviews, and in January we'll give you a full updated report on where we are with the Secretary of State's audit. Clearly there was a great work program that Dr. Bethel has been keeping you very appraised of related to increasing transparency and the Accountability Center, including the launch of the ethics hotline and the many continuous improvement teams that we have underway to improve employee engagement. And as you noted as well, very clean audit this year from Moss Adams. So I do think that it's really been quite a year of accomplishment, and I wanted once again to thank the board for your support and participation as we've hit all of these milestones. I think it's, again, one of the most significant years I think I've seen at TriMet in my now 23, soon going on 24 years in terms of things we've accomplished. And your support is no small part of that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
Comment on the year in reviews. Neil, I would certainly second that, this being a pretty substantial year and the things that as an agency we've been able to accomplish. And, I think the capstone to that is an audit where it's clean and it was so rapid. I mean, that's, we look at outcomes and we look at certain things that we can measure objectively. And, with everything that we've gone through, we've got a team, we've got a system that works, and some of those things that are external, when folks come in externally and take a look at our organization and continue to tell us we're doing things right to a very high standard and go above and beyond those efforts. And that's credit to the leadership that you provide, the great team that we have in place, and again, the colleagues that I get to sit here on the board with. I'm very proud to sit here with them. I also want to thank our partners, our community partners, the stakeholders, and the constituents that work so hard to get us engaged in the things we may not be engaged in on a day-to-day basis. I think that's helped us lead to such a comprehensive review of what we do and how we do things moving forward. I think of Opal and Bus Riders Unite and the work that they've done, Elders in Action, our CAT committee, which includes a lot of folks there. We've got the Budget Task Force, a lot of people, and the Bridge Naming Committee also. I mean, we've got a lot of people that dedicate a lot of time and effort to help us make this organization is what it is and continue to enhance what we do on a daily basis. So again, I want to second what you said, that this has been a significant year, and I'm proud to be part of this organization and the work that we've done, what we've done historically, and I think what we're going to do moving forward.
Thank you. Well said.
I can only echo the good representative from East County. I'm more pithy.
It's because I gave you the stuff to say before. All you have to do is say ditto.
Stole my thunder, brother.
Any other comments? I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, and thank you to the staff, exactly.
Really,
We can't do this without the dedicated staff we have here, and again, have to do a shout out again to our union and for stepping up and being part of the solution here and helping us make these major changes, which allows us to talk about things like service enhancements and things. So good work by everybody, and thanks. I hope this will be shared, maybe put out on the web where people can access it and see what's been gone on, because I think it is a good story, and I think people should understand this board and staff really are committed to actually addressing issues rather than kicking them down the road again. So it's gratifying to see that we're all making progress together on these issues. So thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Concludes my report, other than to wish everyone a very happy holidays.
Okay, yep, same to you. All right, with that then, let's move right into the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have 4 items for the audience. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda portion of the agenda, and then we can have questions and take action on this separately from the resolution, or excuse me, the motion to approve the consent agenda. So again, there's 4 items. I'll just tell you the first one is the resolution we always have when we have ordinance on, which is directing that all ordinances shall be read by title only, so the general counsel doesn't need to read all pages of the ordinance. Approval of the board minutes for November 19th, 2014. A resolution authorizing a contract with CHM Hill for conceptual design and service planning services for the Powell Division Transit and Development Project. And then finally, a resolution authorizing modification to a contract with iMerge Consulting for records management consulting services, one again of the board priorities where we give further direction. So is there any item on the consent agenda that any members of the board would like to have removed? Yes.
Actually, it's a question.
Okay.
I don't necessarily need to remove it if it can, and it has to do with Resolution 141258.
Okay.
I had a little trouble putting the numbers together.
Want to try to address that quickly, and if we can't answer it, we can take it up separately here.
Okay. It says that the first consulting service was not to exceed $150,000. When we come to the total as it being modified, adding the 60, we come to 204,025. I'm a little bit confused as to if the maximum amount from both of these, to me it should be 210, but maybe I missed something to get to 204.
I believe that we didn't actually max out at 150, that we got to about 147, whatever the math difference is. I'm looking at Kim Akimoto. And then the new quote that came in that we're adding on to that is now going to take it to the total of 204.
Okay, so 144,025 was approximately what the first one was.
Correct.
Okay, that helps me now. Okay, that's it.
Are you comfortable now?
I'm comfortable.
All right. So with that, then, is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second? Is there any further discussion? Seeing then, all of those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on to resolutions. We have 2 of those. The first resolution is Resolution 14-12-59, which is authorizing a contract with G4S Secure Solutions USA Incorporated for transit security services. Mr. General Manager.
Board President, members of the board, as you know, at least every 5 years, we go out to the market and test our services in this regard. So this was a result of an RFP process that we actually went through, looking for the most qualified and best level of service for our security services. Recall that we have actually in the back of the room an example of the security services that G4S has provided us in the past, and I would also note that it's a very important and integral part of our overall effort to improve the security of our overall system. G4S officers and our hired security officers, I should note, do provide a great deal of additional help at the end of stops, for example, at Portland State University where the trains turn around, at the airport where the trains need to be checked to make sure they're empty before they are loaded again and depart, and in many other fixed places around the system. Also very helpful in terms of just being an extra presence on the system in a number of different places. Providing assistance to our operators and our customers on a regular basis, and helping us to respond to the peak loads of events. And I would just note that in that regard, one of the challenges, of course, we'll have over the next year is the opening of a new light rail line and wanting to make sure that there's a very strong presence of security personnel as we start that, but also helping us with crowd management during those initial week of celebration. This was a contest that actually looked at qualifications of the firm, the personnel, supervision and training, providing a technical score that then was balanced against a proposed price. The table on the second page of the memo just notes that G4S was the highest rated proposer. Related to diversity, they note that about 12.5% of their Portland-based workforce is composed of minority employees, and they've also committed, and this is new for them, to mentor program intended to use certified DBE firms between 7 and 10% of the total contract amount over its term. So we think that's a good improvement in terms of the diversity program associated with this contract. So with that, I'd certainly be happy to bring Harry up for any questions, but would recommend your approval.
Do you have any questions for Neil or staff on this one?
I just got a quick question on I can certainly appreciate the technicals, the total technical score and how that's calculated. But I'm just wondering, how is the price score calculated?
So generally, it's based on the lowest price getting the highest score.
Correct.
Proportionally, and then it's proportioned, and exactly how it's proportioned, I'd have to look for a little bit of help, but.
Because, I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably the one area where it could be pretty objective, and this isn't just for this
Yes.
contract, but it's across all contracts
Yes.
that we do, where we have the price component. I'm just interested in kind of the algorithm or the calculation that gets us to this. As I look at this, I would assume that there may have been other proposers who didn't make the cut that may have had lower prices, because essentially Coast Industries, which is the lowest price that we see here, has a 45 out of 50.
Right.
I'm not quite sure how we get a 45 out of 50 if they have the lowest price. I mean, unless there are other proposers that we don't see that had lower prices.
There are other proposers that you don't see, but it's apportioned throughout the, I don't know the exact calculation that's made, but it is proportioned among the other proposers as well.
So my history of this is that they are all very mechanical in terms
correct.
of strict ratios, so.
So as Neil noted, price was not the only consideration, although it is very important, but technical capability is, was considered to be just above that.
Well, and as I started, I think the technical side of things is very, very important. So I'm not challenging the distribution or how, or the choice, but I was just more interested in how do we come up with what's the calculation for the price score? Because again, when I saw Coast Industries as being the lowest, as the lowest proposer here, it has a 45 out of 50 when it's the lowest proposer. But then you see the differences between the G4S and the Coast being somewhere around 600,000, just south of 600,000, and then the difference between Allied Barton and G4S being somewhere around 550,000. So relatively close in their differences and the deltas that come between them. But it's more so just wondering. What? Because that could be a pure calculation. I mean, the other ones have some subjectivity to it, but the price component can be very objective, and would just like to kind of understand that in the future, but nothing to take up the board's time at this point. I can connect offline.
We'll get that to you. The number precision 36.54 implies to me there's a very specific formula.
Exactly.
So we'll get that definition to you.
A question if Director Travis is finished.
I am.
Okay. Harry, go down to diversity. You have documentation that G4S has 12.5% of the workforce is of minority employees. Could you provide with me offline later those numbers that make that up by category to get to the 12.5? I'm just interested to make sure that there isn't any double or triple counting in that number.
Yes, and also I want to reiterate what General Manager McFarland stated, and that was G4S is committed to working with other minority firms, 7 to 10% as part of the overall contract price.
Yes.
But we will get that to you, yes.
How's the board feeling? Are we board ready to offer a motion to approve Resolution 14-12-59?
So moved. Second.
I hear a motion, I hear a second. Is there any further discussion on this? All right, hearing none. I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 14-12-59, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Moving on then to Resolution 14-12-60, which is adopting a service guidelines policy. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, you have been briefed on this at a past meeting, but I did want to just provide you an outline of what this is proposing to you. It actually is one of the final recommendations that we need to close from the Secretary of State's audit, which was a request to develop service guidelines and make sure that they're available for the public to sort of understand, if you will, how we go about our service changes and the process associated with that, and the character and considerations that we take into consideration as we develop service plans. So this has been structured in sort of a two-tiered process. One is a one-page policy document that we're recommending that the board adopt. And that outlines, as attached to the resolution itself, a series of reporting requirements, requests for the general manager to develop specific guidelines, and then identifying 5 key policies that the board wants to hear about when we present you with a new service plan to be proposed. And those key guidelines are equity, demand, productivity, which is making sure that the system and the resulting service is efficient in terms of its people carrying capacity, connections, and growth. Those are the things that we would report to you on. And it would, related to the annual service plans that are usually adopted as part of the overall budget. The second tier of the approval would be a series of guidelines that the general manager that I would put in place that would detail how we're actually going to and analyze each of those policies. And also defines the specific timelines associated with our service plan. So you have the current draft of that attached to the board memo. That has been out on our website and with our advisory committees for review and comment. We have reviewed this with the TIAC and we have reviewed this with the CAT in the past. We think that this is the kind of guidelines and framework, these detailed pages, that can change over time. And the best example of that is the work that the TIAC and our staff are doing related to an equity lens. And as that tool is developed further, we would be able to incorporate that tool into these detailed guidelines that the general manager adopts. And so that's the notion about, but the general policies that the board adopts would stay the same. So that's the framework and that's the threshold. And so the request for you today, the recommendation is to actually adopt Exhibit A to the resolution, which is the TriMet Service Guidelines Policy. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or direct any questions to inform staff.
It's a pleasure of the board. Any questions or comments on this one? I think, go ahead.
Just got a quick comment. Certainly, seeing some of the draft data and information on this, I am very supportive of identifying and outlining what we have here, these service guidelines, fully supportive of that. It'll just, as far as implementation of the service guidelines, it's always going to be an interesting adventure. That's what I'll call it, as we move towards something like this, because we do want to get the input, and it's out at the various committees, and I think we'll continue to vet, some of these items. But I think as far as the areas that we're looking at in regards to the service guidelines, equity, demand, productivity, connections, and growth are all critical components that we need to look at. And I know this is the first step, and we'll continue to vet what we're doing here. But, you know, I'm excited to be able to see something as an organization that will be able to allow the public to help give us input as we move forward on service enhancements and guidelines.
Good comments. Other comments, questions by the board? No, I think I just second what Director Stahlball is saying, is this is a good set of principles, and hopefully we'll move forward and adopt this, and it'll help people understand how we make our decisions in terms of service planning and service provision for the transit agency. So with that then, is the board, somebody ready to offer a motion to approve Resolution 14-12-60?
So moved.
Second. A motion, I hear a second. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, if not, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 14-12-60, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. All right, unanimously. I can't speak today. So let's move on to the final. Yes.
Break time.
You okay? I think we have a request for a small 5 minutes. Is that adequate?
5 to, yeah.
5 minutes. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Is there a clock, or, you know,
No, I
punch in, punch
tell you
out, or
what. Let's 5 minutes, and we'll see how we're doing.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Let's take a break.